Kia ora and welcome. I'm Janet Stephenson. I'm a research professor at the University of Otago. And I'm going to talk today about culture and sustainability. And in particular, I'm going to introduce the cultures framework. The cultures framework is a conceptual framework about the relationship between culture and sustainability. And it's covered in this book of mine that was produced in 2023, but which I'm now cutting down into a series of short videos to make it more accessible to people and potentially also for use by classes. So this second video is introducing the cultures framework. But it's within the context of a number of other videos that explain the application of the cultures framework in more detail in later videos. The cultures framework has been well used and tested since we developed it over 10 years ago and tested in many research applications, both in New Zealand, the country where I live, but also internationally by other research teams. And in later videos, I'll be talking about some of that research and how it's given insights into human society and change over time. It was originally developed to examine energy cultures, so we were really interested in energy questions at the time, but it was very productive in the sense of giving really good insights into behaviour, and it's now widely applied to other topics, generally looking at how culture relates to sustainability outcomes. And I'm just going to introduce the framework itself in this video and introduce the 5 key concepts that it is based on. Firstly, we base it on the cultural ensemble. And in my last video, I introduced the idea that culture is about the linkages between how we think, what we have, and what we do. In the cultures framework, we give it a slightly more academic language, and we talk about motivators in the things that are how we think and what motivates us to act the way we do. Materiality, covering all of the things that we have and that we make and that physically influence our lives. And activities, covering things that we do on an occasional or a regular basis. So the cultural ensemble is this set of interrelated cultural features. So when we're talking about materiality or things, that could include objects, tools, technologies of various sorts, infrastructure, artifacts, the foods that we eat, lots and lots of things that are part of our everyday lives. Activities include actions of doing, making, using, acquiring, behaving, performing, and also routines, which we often call habits or practices or rituals, so things that we do on a regular and repeated basis. Motivators include our norms or the things that we think are the right thing to do on a regular basis, the expectations that we and others have about how we should live our lives, traditions, rules in a more general sense, not necessarily legal rules, but the rules that we apply to our lives, and the aspirations that we have to live how we do or how we think we should do. It includes values, morals, and principles, our beliefs, ideas, and concepts, the knowledge and understandings that we bring to the world, and also the symbolism or the meanings that underlie what we have and what we do. To give you an example, and you've probably got one of these either in your pocket or in your bag or on your desk beside you, a mobile phone. So a mobile phone is obviously a technology or a thing, but alongside that, if we look at motivators, it has become the norm within society, within many societies, that we can't live our lives without one. In fact, it's often hard to get things done in any sense without one of these phones. It also carries with it a whole lot of symbolism and meanings, not only the phone itself, but the type of phone that you have and maybe the image that you use on the front cover of the phone, the apps that you have in there and use. All of these have symbolism and meanings to you and others who you are part of your lives. In order to operate your phone, you've got to bring a lot of knowledge and understandings of how it works. And in terms of activities, you had the activity of acquiring or choosing your phone. You've got activities around using your phone. And around that, you've also probably developed a whole lot of routines that you do on a regular basis, probably every day, maybe every hour, and maybe even more frequently than that. And when you see these three aspects, the materiality, the having, the thinking, the motivators, and the doing, the activities, reinforcing each other, not only in your own lives, but also creating cultural ensembles in thousands and millions of other people around the world. So there we have an example of a cultural ensemble relating to a mobile phone that is very clearly evident in similar patterns across many, many people across the world. So if you're in a class, this might be a useful thing for you to focus on for a moment. You could stop the video here and think about what is your cultural ensemble for your everyday transport, how you get to here in your class, how you get home again, maybe how you go to the shops and back again. Have a think about that and maybe note down the materiality or what you have, the activities that you carry out, and importantly, the motivators that encourage you to do it in this way. The second concept is around actors. Whose culture are we describing? So it might be a groups of individuals that we're looking at. It may be groups of households. It could be small businesses, or it could be multinationals or governments that we're looking at the culture of. So whenever we're talking about culture, it's always in relation to people or organisations. The third idea I want to bring to this is the idea of agency. And this is important when we're thinking about the relationship between culture and sustainability. So agency is thinking about what is it that the actors can control? Where do they have a choice in terms of their materiality or their activities or their motivators? And can they actually act on that choice, particularly if they want to change it? And so we indicate the agency by this dotted line and talk about this as the actor's realm of influence. In the cultures framework, we can think of some of those constraints on agency as being things like your income level, your education, the amount of power that you have in the situation, and your degree of wellness, your ability to actually take action to make this thing happen. An agency can be reduced by many things. For example, if you're a tenant, if you have a landlord, your landlord will be controlling your building in many ways, your heating system, your insulation, the lengths of the building. In terms of your activities will be constrained by your tenancy agreement, by laws, and the landlord's flexibility can limit what you can actually do in that house. And also the landlord's own beliefs, values and aspirations will shape what you can do in that place and shape what they will let you do and have. So in this situation, for example, if you were living in a cold, damp house or flat or apartment, it may be that your ability to change that is really, really limited because your landlord has limited your agency or your ability to act. We'll be looking at some examples of where that changes in future videos. But you might like to have a think, if you're in a class again, about what limits your ability to change your transport culture. So what are the constraints on your agency, on your ability to have a choice and act on that choice? Fourth concept in the cultures framework, again relating culture to sustainability, is to look at external influences. So external influences to your culture may be supporting the status quo, supporting what your cultural ensemble is, or there may be external influences out there that are driving or potentially could drive change. So using the example of transport, there are in many countries, many external influences that reinforce a car-dominating transport culture. So that might be things like the fact that your government chooses to make most of its investments in roads and motorways, that public transport is expensive and hard to use, that your urban form, your cities and towns are very sprawling, so you need a car to get from one place to another. And also it may be things like car advertisements and promotional media that actually impress on you that it's important to own a car to be a normal human being within that society. At the same time, there may be external influences that support change that are happening. It may be that there's investment in safe walking and cycling infrastructure, or low-cost, seamless public transport, urban densification, or subsidies for electric vehicles that might encourage you to buy one of those. And those kinds of influences may be supporting change away from heavy use of internal combustion engine cars towards other forms of transport. So the cultures framework helps you think about what are the influences that are beyond my agency, beyond my ability to control, but are controlling me either in positive ways to change my culture to become more sustainable, or maybe in negative ways to encourage me to maintain my current inefficient and unsustainable transport culture. So again, what you might like to think about in your class is what are some external influences on your transport culture. Final element of the cultures framework is about outcomes. And it's looking at what are the outcomes of this cultural ensemble that you're caught up in, and how might we measure those outcomes. And in relation to sustainability, we might be interested in the relative greenhouse gas emissions. We might be interested in energy efficiency. We might be interested in human well-being, health and well-being. We might be interested in social equity. So in a transport sense, transport can be either positive in relation to some of these measures, or it might be giving a more negative outcome in relation to some of those measures. So the cultures framework invites you to think about what is that relationship between your what you have, think and do on a regular basis that maybe you're locked into, and those outcomes that you might be interested in a sustainability sense. And again, if you're in a class, you might like to think about what some of the sustainability related outcomes of your particular transport culture are, which may be negative or maybe neutral or maybe very positive in terms of sustainability. So there we have the cultures framework with those 5 elements, and it's something that can be applied in many, many different situations, and in future videos we will look at some examples where this framework has helped us understand processes of stasis or the inability for cultures to change, or has created opportunities for change towards more sustainable outcomes. So I look forward to meeting you in future videos as they are released on my website, Culture and Sustainability. Thank you.